Welcome back to Learn Your Stripes. I'm Michael Moran.
And I'm Ryan Guillory, and we'll start tonight with the result of our play from the last episode. 3rd and 9 from the B40. A12 throws a pass to A80. Prior to the pass arriving, B23 pulls on A80's jersey and breaks his stride. The pass falls incomplete, and B10 launches at A80's head. In frustration, A88 retaliates by punching B10 in the head. What foul or fouls do you have? What is the enforcement? What is the game clock and play clock status? At both the high school and college level, this is going to be defensive pass interference. At the high school level, their yardage will result in a first down, so it'll be 1st and 10A from the B25. At the college level, we don't tell you where the spot is. If the DPI was within 15 yards of the line of scrimmage, it'll be a spot foul. Otherwise, it's going to be a 15-yard penalty and the ball will be placed at the B25. We'll also have a dead ball personal foul against B10 for targeting. He's automatically disqualified at the college level and may be disqualified if the foul is flagrant at the high school level. A80 will be ejected for fighting at both levels. The yardage for these two fouls will cancel. The game clock at both levels will start on the snap due to the incomplete pass. In college, the play clock will be set at 25 seconds. With the change this year in high school, as we'll have a defensive foul, the play clock will be set at 40 seconds.
Now that one was a mouthful. Quite a bit going on there. So that's one of our more intricate plays. And I think from experience, right, we know they don't usually get that complicated. But that's why we have these, just to get our brains thinking about different things that can happen. So
yeah, you got to be ready for it.
Now, last episode, we had our wives join us, and we hope you all enjoyed that. That was a lot of fun. I know I enjoyed getting to talk to both Megan and Jenny. Absolute blast to have both of them on. So maybe we'll look forward to doing that another time. And hopefully they asked questions that you all had burning questions too as well, and our listeners got something out of that.
Yeah, this is going to have to be one of our episodes with just the two of us, and these seem to be our least popular.
Sorry, folks.
Kind of saying a message to us, I guess, as it goes, but you'll have to put up with us for the next few minutes at least.
So this week, we're going to talk a little bit more about rule changes. And in episode 21, we discussed the major rule changes in the 2022 season. But we had a request to discuss some more in-depth and compare and contrast a couple of big rule changes at both our levels here, both high school and college. The biggest high school rule changes here is the intentional grounding. Here in Indiana, we've had week 1 already, and so hopefully some folks have had a chance to experience that and see that and put that into practice. The biggest college rule changes here is blocking below the waist. Both rules bring the two levels closer together. So NCAA and federation rules kind of coming closer together on how things are interpreted. But there's a couple significant differences we want to talk about. So as usual, we're going to start with high school, and we will talk about the newest intentional grounding first. Ryan, what's going on there?
I think this will be helpful, at least for whether you work high school and just watch college on Saturdays, or if you just work college and you're seeing something at the high school level and trying to figure out how they got there, if they screwed up, or if you work both levels and you're trying to keep these things straight from Friday night to Saturdays. So,
right.
As you said, the big change for high school this year is the change to intentional grounding. That's going to be in Rule 752, Exception 2. It's adding a new exception for the passer. That exception allows the passer to legally throw the ball away to conserve yardage. This will allow a player to purposefully throw an incomplete forward pass without warranting an intentional grounding penalty, provided the passer is outside of the pocket being the lateral boundary of the free blocking zone, and the pass reaches the neutral zone or the extension of the neutral zone beyond the sideline. Now, the pass does not have to be thrown by the player who controlled the snap. This is important to keep in mind at the high school level. It can be thrown from within the free blocking zone as long as the ball has previously left the free blocking zone, and the neutral zone is extended beyond the sidelines, technically to an infinite end, but obviously there's only so far that the quarterback can actually throw the ball.
True.
So that's what we're looking at in high school. Michael, can you remind us of the intentional grounding rule for college?
Right. So on the college side, Rule 732, a forward pass is illegal if the passer, to conserve time, throws the ball directly to the ground after the ball has already touched the ground, or not immediately after controlling the snap. So talking about after the ball touching the ground, if they were to muff the snap and it bounced down and back up, that would be an illegal forward pass. Second bullet point, the passer, to conserve time, throws the ball into an area where there is no eligible Team A receiver, the eligible being key. Or the passer, to conserve yardage, throws the ball forward into an area where there is also no eligible Team A receiver.
Now, between those two, the high school rule and the college rule, there are some important similarities to keep in mind. So whether you're working both levels, watching one of the other levels, or just watching a game at both levels, these are the similarities that we'll have. So we have to ensure that at some point the quarterback gets outside of the free blocking zone or tackle box. It doesn't necessarily have to be the quarterback. It could be whoever controls the snap, right? So if the quarterback at the high school level gets the snap and hands off to a running back, as long as that running back gets outside of the free blocking zone, then we've satisfied that requirement there. Again, at the college level, as Michael said, it's the player who controls the snap. That might not be the quarterback. If he muffs it in the air and the running back controls it, if that running back then gets outside of the tackle box, then we're going to be okay there. Now, reaching the neutral zone doesn't matter if an eligible receiver is in the area, and that's still going to be true at both levels, right? So that was always the rule in high school before. We were always looking under the old rule. We were always looking for an eligible, right? We didn't have the outside of the pocket neutral zone exception that we have now. We were always looking for an eligible receiver. And now, as long as you have an eligible receiver, then the neutral zone extended or the being outside of the free blocking zone in high school doesn't matter. Same thing in college. None of this matters if there's an eligible receiver there in the area. Now, at both levels, again, the neutral zone will extend indefinitely beyond the sideline, right? So, thinking to Friday nights, Michael and I are line of scrimmage officials. I'm line of scrimmage on Saturday. If that quarterback is outside of the free blocking zone or the tackle box and throws it, if it crosses the line of scrimmage 20 feet behind me, it's still crossed the line of scrimmage. Or, I said line of scrimmage. I know the technical term here for the rule is neutral zone. So let's be technically correct there, and I will use the correct terminology. That neutral zone extends infinitely behind me. So if it crosses that neutral zone 20 yards, 30 yards behind me, then we don't have a foul for intentional grounding. It's important at both levels not to be overly technical, right? We don't want to be too forgiving on the eligible receiver in the area, right? There are limitations there. If it's 15 to 20 yards away, then we don't have a receiver in the area. You can only do so much to make that legal. If there's a pass and it bounces, 6 inches from the neutral zone, I'm going to probably say, hey, we've reached the neutral zone, and give that information to the referee there.
I think the important thing too is when we're talking about distance, I think most folks have adopted 5 yards, right, Ryan?
Yeah.
5 yards. Now, coming back to the ball, 7? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's 5 and 7. A stationary receiver, we're looking for 5 yards. If the player's coming back to the ball, you use 7. And some guideposts that you can use to sort of help you with that, or obviously the yard lines, but it seldom was going to happen that you're going to be able to just look directly down the field and count, because there's going to be angles involved and that type of thing. So use what you have. The big lines tell you what 5 yards are. The top of the numbers, that gives you 9 yards. That's your 9-yard mark. So you can sort of use landmarks on the field to help you get there. But if it's 5 versus 5.5 yards or 7 versus 7.25 yards,
don't be overly technical, right?
You shouldn't have a tape measure with you in your pocket on the field, or go try to borrow one from the trainer. You're looking for 5 and 7. 5 and 7 doesn't mean 15 and 25. So
there you go.
Don't be overly technical, but you have to enforce the rules still. One of the other things that we want to look at is that if we do have legal grounding here, we're going to pass on those ineligible receivers downfield. Sometimes just because when you do have a grounding play, that tends to be one of those slow developing plays. Slow developing plays are when your antenna have to really be up about linemen getting downfield. Nothing's happening. The ball hasn't passed them. They're getting excited. They see a linebacker 5 yards downfield. They want to go do something on that play, right? And then that forward pass is thrown, and we've got a problem. If it's grounding, yeah, it was an ineligible receiver downfield. It's technically a foul, but we're going to pass on that unintentional grounding. And finally, we're going to give the passer some leeway at both levels if he's contacted after he starts the throw, right? So think about, the 5 and 7 yards, or does it quite make the line of scrimmage? if we see a bona fide pass attempt, the quarterback has begun the throw, but then he just gets drilled and that ball falls short, we're going to pass on intentional grounding on that play, right? The quarterback's not trying to just dump the ball to conserve time or conserve yardage. He just got drilled and the pass just couldn't make it to where it was clearly trying to get to. Doesn't mean that the pass was going to be complete or incomplete. It just means that he wasn't trying to illegally conserve time or yardage by dumping the ball. Now, the difference there, the opposite of that, is that if the throwing motion starts after the contact, so let's say you've got a defensive end, he's got that quarterback in his grasp, quarterback can't get away, it's clear that he's about to get sacked, and then he just throws it into no man's land, doesn't reach the neutral zone, there's no eligible receiver in the area, then intentional grounding comes into play in that scenario, because that is the scenario where the quarterback is just trying to dump the ball to either conserve yardage or conserve time. So again, the overarching thing there at both levels is the quarterback just getting rid of the ball to conserve yardage or conserve time, or is there a bona fide pass attempt and there's just contact that comes into play that prevents from getting it to 5 or 7, or prevents it from getting back to the neutral zone if he was outside of the free blocking zone or the tackle box. So there's a lot of similarities between the two rules at both levels, but there's some important differences that we have to keep in mind if you're working both levels or you're watching football at both levels. And Michael's going to hit on those now.
I think the biggest one is the enforcement spot. So high school is a 5-yard from the spot of the foul and a loss of down. And college is just a loss of down at the spot of the foul. And that's an important mechanic too. When we talk about this, the referee needs to, if there's a question involving intentional grounding, the referee needs to move to that spot. And you'll see this sometimes, if you're watching a game, referee might move to the spot where the ball was thrown from and might have a quick conversation with the wing. And simple questions. Did it get back to the line, or was there somebody in the area? One of those two things. And that it's a yes or no question. And then if a foul happens, a foul happens. But the major difference is the 5-yard penalty there for high school as well. And again, don't forget the loss of down in both cases. Right. So, of course, we mentioned it earlier in high school, any player may legally ground the ball. So if the QB leaves the free blocking zone and tosses back to a receiver in motion, and the receiver grounds the ball or something like that. I think we had a play like that a couple weeks ago. There's no foul there. If he gives it to a running back who runs around and ditches it, that's fine too. But in college, it has to be the player who originally controlled the snap. Again, Ryan said earlier, it doesn't have to be the quarterback, but whoever controls that snap is the only one who can ground that ball. All right. Also in high school, a pass legally grounding the ball may be thrown in the free blocking zone if the ball has once left the free blocking zone. Again, we've talked about that before. Once a player's out, he's out. But in college, if there's no eligible receiver, legally grounding requires that the player originally controlling snap has to be outside of that tackle box.
I think a way to think about this is that with the overarching emphasis on safety at both levels, grounding it's a safety rule, right? Because before, under the old rules, the quarterback, or in high school now, the player controlling the ball at that point couldn't just get rid of the ball without having a foul called, if there wasn't an eligible receiver in the area. The whole idea now is they just get rid of the ball. They don't have to take a hit. They don't have to try to scramble and, potentially take some big hit as a play is breaking down, because when you see them trying to ground the ball, it's typically something that there's just nothing there. The play's breaking down. They're under a lot of pressure. And before, that was a real chance for some really big hits. You could obviously the concern about concussions, other injuries. So the high school rule change really brings in another aspect of safety. And, as Michael just emphasized, it's much more forgiving even than the college rule, right? Because it doesn't have to be the quarterback. You can hand it off. It can be from back within the free blocking zone if it's left it already. So the idea is that we're giving a mechanism to just get rid of the ball with no foul, survive and play another down. Obviously, if they've grounded it legally, they're going to lose the down, but there's no yardage foul because otherwise, as Michael said, there's a 5-yard foul in high school. So really, you're just giving up a down here, but your players are safe and they're just surviving to play another down.
Yeah, it's a compromise, right? You're trying to save the players from taking hits, but you don't want to not reward the defense for making a good play, right?
Right.
you don't want to bail them out and allow them just to go free willy. That's why we have the foul for intentional grounding, but it's a compromise between the two.
Right. Now, the other big rule change this year, we just covered intentional grounding, which in our opinion, I think most people's opinion, is the most significant rule change at the high school level for 2022. The big change is another change to blocking below the waist at the college level. So this is another one where I think the college change has brought the two levels closer together. I think it's still moving towards eliminating blocking below the waist altogether, but it's sort of a half step this year at the college level to get there. And last year, obviously, we had a big change at the high school level. So currently, the high school rule, it's set forth in Rule 2-17-2. That provides that blocking below the waist is permitted in the free blocking zone when the following conditions are met. All players involved in the blocking are on the line of scrimmage and in the zone at the snap. The contact occurs in the zone, and the block is an immediate initial action following the snap. So this was that change that we had last year where the only players allowed to block below the waist are players who are on or within a yard of the line at the snap inside of the free blocking zone, and they have to have that initial charge is when that block below the waist has to happen. So they can't take 2 steps back and then block below the waist, can't pull around and then block below the waist, has to be immediately on the snap. Otherwise, at the high school level, there's no blocking below the waist. Running backs can't block below the waist. Doesn't matter where they line up. Doesn't matter if they're stationary. Doesn't matter if they were in motion. Doesn't matter if they're directly behind a lineman who does qualify to block below the waist. There's just no blocking below the waist. So the high school rule is pretty darn restrictive as to who can block below the waist and when. Otherwise, we're just not allowing it. So there's some big changes to the college rule this year. We discussed it in episode 21, but we're going to go a little more in depth now and have a discussion, and I'll give it back to Michael for that.
So if you want to follow along, it's Rule 916. We'll cover both the offensive side and the defensive side. So for the offense, linemen with an initial position completely inside the tackle block box may legally block below the waist inside the tackle box on the initial line charge. And any block initiated 1 yard beyond the neutral zone is considered to be within that tackle box, so going into the defensive side of the ball. After the initial line charge, these linemen may block below the waist within the tackle box until the ball leaves the tackle box, and that force has to be considered from the front. And again, another thing we've talked about in the past, the front being that 10-2 region, giving the defender a chance to see it coming. Now, for stationary backs that are lined up within the tackle box, and again, the emphasis is stationary, so they can't be in motion. But if they're within the tackle box, they can block below the waist. Also, the block has to be within the tackle box. And again, until the ball leaves the tackle box. Their block has to be as well from the front, again, 10-2. The big kind of change, or big piece of this, rather, is the stationary back has to be getting what we call a piece of the tackle. There's been some great videos released on it, some good discussion. I know the CFO's talked about it, but if the back does not have to be completely inside the tackle box, it can be just his foot, and he's considered within and can make that block. Outside of that, all other Team A players are not allowed to block below the waist. So somewhat similar to high school, you have kind of that initial tackle box. So now for Team B, again, both are, in the case of no change of possession, prior to any sort of change of possession, B players aligned within a stationary position of 1 yard of their line of scrimmage, again, inside the tackle box, may block below the waist in the tackle box. So this can't be linebackers coming in. This can't be defensive backs, cutting a guard or a lead blocker of sorts. It has to be kind of those defensive linemen in the front. Otherwise, everybody else is excluded from this rule and may not block below the waist, unless they're making a tackle, of course, but kind of goes without saying.
Yeah, and I think I need to clarify, when I was talking about the high school level, I mentioned defense being within 1 yard of the line of scrimmage. Obviously, that's the terminology at the college level. I'm thinking of those players who might be standing up and, right at the line. But as far as terminology goes, if we're going to be technical here, which I think we need to be when discussing rules, I shouldn't have said for the high school level, a defender within 1 yard of the line of scrimmage, since that's the actual terminology at the college level. But again, the idea for high school is a defender on the line of scrimmage at the snap.
And the same kind of goes in both cases, right? If we're again, hopefully a lot of you are working high school and potentially working towards college. That's what we want. We want this to be informative. It just goes to show that we've got to know the rules. Everybody has to know the rules, and you've got to keep them separate. As similar as they might be, they do have their subtle differences, and it's important. Now, we'd like to think this show is out here to inform people and generate some good discussion, and we can all talk about plays we have or things we've seen, and we encourage those questions. You can email them to learnyourstripes@gmail.com, of course. But the important thing is we want you to take these rules and be prepared. And then we talked early on in the show about axioms and how to apply them. So like Ryan said, 5 to 5.5 yards on an intentional grounding is something we talked about. Again, on the defensive side of the ball, defensive players can't exactly be in the line of scrimmage in high school, right? That's a foul. So they kind of are by definition allowed a yard per se. And that's where your philosophy and your axioms have to come into play. But Ryan, thanks for clarifying. So what other similarities do we have going on at both levels?
Yeah, so at both the high school and the college level, linemen who are either within the free blocking zone or tackle box, depending on your level, and on the line of scrimmage at the snap, may block below the waist on their initial charge. That's true at both levels. Players who are outside of the free blocking zone or the tackle box may not block below the waist. Fairly simple to remember, right? You talked about the backs at the college level. That's where the difference comes in. I know you'll cover that, but if you're within the free blocking zone or the tackle box, potentially you're going to be permitted to block below the waist. At high school, it has to be linemen there. In college, as you said, there could be some backs there. But receivers, tight ends, a second tackle on one side, they're outside the free blocking zone, outside the tackle box. They don't qualify.
That's a great point. If you have teams that run a tackle over,
right?
Where center, guard, tackle, that second tackle is not in the free blocking zone or tackle box. Contrary though, if you had a tight end right on the other side of the ball, he would be in the tackle box or free blocking zone.
Yeah, I mean, I know we always talk about 5 yards and taking the ball and then measuring out, but you can always envision what the free blocking zone or the tackle box is. With normal splits, it's going to be a center and then 2 linemen on each side. And a lineman may not be a tackle. Like you said, it could be a tight end depending on the formation, but it's a center with 2 linemen with normal splits on both sides. There's your free blocking zone. There's your tackle box. Pretty easy there. So that's your players inside or outside. At both levels, wide receivers can't block below the waist. Linebackers who are off the line of scrimmage can't block below the waist. DBs can't block below the waist. That defensive end who wants to get really wide and cut that lead blocker, not anymore.
Nope.
There's, of course, at both levels, there's no blocking below the waist on free kicks, on kick returns, or on changes of possession. Now, you mentioned an exception to that, Michael. Of course, a tackle can be a block below the waist. That's not out of the game. That's a means of tackling.
Yeah, technically
still.
Speaking, sure. Yeah.
Don't be that pioneer who sees a tackle below the waist and throws a flag for blocking below the waist, right? That was not going to verify very well for you. And as we said, players in motion cannot block below the waist. So that's true at both the high school and the college level. As Michael said, with the college rule is a little more permissive as to who may qualify to block below the waist. But you can't enter the tackle box in motion and then qualify there. So those are the similarities, and obviously there's some pretty big differences. We've sort of talked about them through the rules, but I think Michael's going to helpfully spell them out a little bit more for us here.
Sure. So in high school, we're only permitted on the initial charge and from the front. And in college, linemen can block from the side on their initial charge or from the front until the ball leaves the tackle box. Now, at the time of this recording, this is August of 2022. There is still some discussion at the college level surrounding what initial charge means. So I expect by the end of this particular season that to be clarified a little bit. But initial charge generally is that first step. I guess you could have 2 steps, but that first step has to be your initial charge. That's the general leaning at this point. Secondarily, high school backs may not block below the waist, but in college, a stationary back may block below the waist as long as it's from the front. And the most common thing you're going to see there, especially with the passing game the way it is now, there's usually a running back next to the quarterback who might pick up that blitzing linebacker and who will cut him. Usually because there's a sizable difference in body types. So most of the running backs will go low. And there's some big guys out there. Don't get me wrong. So all the Jerome Bettis is out there. Please don't take me too seriously on that. But that's generally where you'll see that running back cutting that blitzing linebacker.
And of course, as you said, that's that stationary back who's inside of the tackle box at the snap.
Correct. He has to be inside the tackle box. So, and then lastly, eligible players in college can, and by eligible we don't mean eligible to catch a pass. We mean eligible to make a block below the waist. They're eligible to do so in college until the ball leaves the zone. So that's a time difference you're going to experience between high school and college, right? So in high school, it's going to be essentially snap and then block. Right. At the high school level, again, kind of going back to my running back scenario, there's going to be a snap, a 1 Mississippi, a 2 Mississippi, and then you might have a cut from the running back on a blitzing linebacker. So there's just a slight time difference that's allowed until the ball leaves the zone.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it. In high school, the block below the waist, it just has to be almost instantaneous with the snap. Once that, let's say you have a quarterback who drops back, by the time he's dropping back, then we don't have an initial charge anymore from the lineman, right? Or, at the college level, as you said, there's a little bit more time involved as long as the ball stays in the pocket. The quarterback hasn't left the free blocking zone, or the ball hasn't been handed off or been passed out of, or somehow otherwise gotten out of the free blocking zone. Then you could have a delayed, if you will,
Sure.
a delayed block below the waist by a player who was initially within the tackle box, eligible to block below the waist as long as that is from the front. It's those ones from the side that just are very dangerous, right? Those blocks below the waist from the side are where you see knees go angles that they're not designed to go, and nothing good often comes of that, right? But
it's a safety foul. I mean, at the college level, referees probably gonna have to help out with the backs blocking low. Wings might be able to get it if it's like an H back or something like that. As a deep wing now, I know if I see a block below the waist, odds are it's not in the tackle box. if I'm watching my correct initial keys, I shouldn't be looking in the tackle box. So any block that I see should be picked up as a foul. And then again, in high school, we talked about it. I think your short wings are probably going to get it right away, or your umpire perhaps. Anything outside of that, no go.
Yeah, if you've been working college for a couple years, I think that this rule, I'm speaking for myself, and I think we've talked about this before.
Sure.
It's a pretty welcome change, simplifying the rule that we have, because the old rule was convoluted, right? You had to think about where they started from. Are they blocking back towards the ball, or are they blocking away from the ball? If it's a receiver, is it more than 5 yards downfield? Mm-hmm. Is it within 5 yards? And my toughest plays I've had the last couple of years were plays that were right at that 5 yard mark. It was very difficult, but that's not a thing anymore. If a wide receiver who split out blocks below the waist, it's a foul. Easy, right?
Right.
So I think for me on the line of scrimmage, and probably for you too as a deep wing, Michael, I think this just really simplifies things. If you see it out on the edge, it's illegal. There's no more counting, no more calculating where it occurred, looking back to where the line of scrimmage was, or thinking through where you had in your head at the snap. It's just a foul. So it's a positive step. I think at some point you're going to see these rules come even more in line. It just seems like it's going towards taking out blocking below the waist altogether at both levels, but sort of baby steps to get there, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Right. We'll end it there. Thank you all once again for joining us on this episode of Learn Your Stripes. And as always, we want to leave you with a play to consider.
All right, 4th and 10 at the A40. A99's punt is caught by B23 at the B20. B23 returns the punt, and at the A6, waves his finger in the air and points to the scoreboard. At the snap, A had 5 players in the backfield. What's the result of this play in high school? In college? Who will be next to put the ball in play and where, in high school and in college?
We will discuss that play at the start of our next episode. But in the meantime, if you want to let us know what your ruling would be, or if you have any questions or feel we made a mistake, please let us know, again, at learnyourstripes@gmail.com. You can also contact us at learnyourstripes@gmail.com if you're interested in sponsoring an episode or advertising on the show. You can find us on your app of choice or obtain episodes at learnyourstripespodcast.com. Also, we ask you to follow us on Facebook at Learn Your Stripes Podcast, on Instagram with the same name, and on Twitter at LYS_podcast. If you enjoy the podcast, please tell your friends about it and rate us 5 stars. We would greatly appreciate it. And leave a review of that on your favorite podcast app of choice. We'll see you all back here soon. And in the meantime, keep on learning your stripes.
Thank you, everyone.